Singing now or after the sermon?
We're singing after the sermon.
Thank you. So today's sermon is about freedom or freedoms, broadly speaking. And it's suggested in part by the events of July 4th and the Declaration of Independence and the historic events that many of us were raised hearing about. Although upon reflection and retrospection, we don't always really know what it was we were taught. I've had to go back and almost relearn what the War of Independence, 1776, all the events of that. And for those of you who who need a refresher, you can see that musical Hamilton this weekend on the Disney Channel. No, I'm just kidding about that. It's not a reliable history, but it's a darn good musical. So if you get a chance to see it, you'll probably enjoy it. And it's important when we talk about the freedoms to talk about freedom as an essential component of our Christian faith and also our particular United Church of Christ Congregationalist heritage faith, because we believe that we have freedoms that not everyone has associated with religion. On this day, it's important to remember that not everyone has the freedoms, even now, that are described, or that were aspirations of the people who celebrated and who wrote the Declaration of Independence. Elizabeth made me agree that I would not do at length talking about Frederick Douglass in exchange for having the extra long video. But I thought it was so important to hear his actual words from 150 years ago about the unfulfilled aspirations of the Declaration of Independence, and seeing his ancestors reading it. I don't know if you felt this too, but it really brought it into the present, that these struggles for freedom are still very much with us, an important part of our country right now. We are struggling for freedom for all, for what it really means. And the Old Testament lesson, the Song of Solomon, talks about the freedom of the body, the goodness of the body. It's almost ironic that passage is preserved in the Bible. And as I said, ministers were sent in the lectionary a reminder that we don't actually have to use that reading if it's considered too sensual or too carnal for church worship. In the United Church of Christ, we should be proud to celebrate the freedom of the body and the goodness of the body. Essential freedoms are a gift to us from God. And in our United Church of Christ tradition, we have always tried to uphold these, though just as we acknowledge the shortcomings of our country on July 4th as a government, and we also have to acknowledge that the United Church of Christ, our Congregationalist heritage, also was a participant in slaveholding and endorsed it in the early years of the founding of the United States. I was pained to discover that Puritan ministers in Massachusetts, which is where I first joined the United Church of Christ, were often paid in slaves or given incentives or rewards. This is part of our heritage, and in order to purge from us and it, the evils of white supremacy, we have to be willing to talk about it and acknowledge it. Now, at the same time, in the 19th century, the United Church of Christ, the Congregationalist Church, became very involved in a number of justice movements, including the abolition of slavery, and founded schools that exist today, like Oberlin College and Howard University, that were places committed to the education of all, including women and including men and women who were African descended. And that was not possible. They also established many other colleges, but Howard and Oberlin, I think, are perhaps the most famous that still exist. And we became very identified with the abolitionist movement, and I think have retained our commitment to this, even through our most recent participation in and support for the Black Lives Matter movement. This is what it means to be UCC, what it means to be Congregationalists. We have freedoms in our religious faith that not others practice, and we are committed to freedom for all people, ideally. We fall short sometimes, but we are committed. And by freedoms in our religious faith, I want to say this: We have freedoms as people in the Congregationalist tradition to read the Bible and interpret it for ourselves. The church does not tell us what to believe. The church doesn't own our property, the United Church. We own our property. We have freedoms there. The United Church of Christ, the Congregational Church, was the state church in many states in New England up through the 1830s. But we relinquished that authority so that people could choose their religious faith. They didn't do it right away. It was, for sometimes it was 60 or 70 years after the Declaration of Independence. But we have a fundamental belief in people's freedom to choose their own religious destiny. Even more recently, in the 20th century, we were one of the few churches to be a pro-choice church. In 1972, when Roe versus Wade, the decision was rendered by the Supreme Court, the United Church of Christ, the Congregationalist Church, distinguished itself as a church that said, this is up to women to choose, not for men to regulate. So this is part of our heritage, choosing, choice. And I want to use that as a background to talk about Jesus's vision for the church and also our financial commitments. Here's the minister paranoia that I'll cop to. We are often expected to talk about money or to raise money, at least during the stewardship drive, and then often criticized. People will say later, all they do is talk about money. So I don't think I talk about money that much, but today I'm going to. And it's because I believe in it, and I believe in our church, and I believe in our church's future, and I hope that you do too. This is one reason why we have to talk about it. We don't get money from some larger group. We give money out of choice. And our approach should always be, I believe this is one of my dearest held spiritual beliefs, that God wants everything from us that we are willing to give from volition. God does not want anything from coercion. Volition, not coercion. And I believe in that principle in every aspect of our lives, including our financial lives. So Jesus opens up this passage in Matthew's gospel, and he's a little petulant. If you were listening, you could hear it, because he says, I don't know what to do with you people. It's one of the few times that he loses patience a little bit. Now, he does recover by the end, graceful save, but at first he's a little whiny. He says, I really don't know what to do with this whole generation. If I try to get you to do one thing, if I tell you about one thing, then you disobey or reject it. If I tell you something else, if I play happy music, you don't want to dance. If I play sad music, you don't want to grieve. I don't know what to do. My colleague, John the Baptist, came wearing weird clothes and eating weird food. And then what you said about him was he's possessed by a demon, because John took a very severe approach. And then Jesus says, and here I come, and look, I'm all about loving everybody. I drink with you, I eat with you, and not only that, I eat and drink with people who are not considered respectable. And he names them. They say, and when I do that, what do you say? You say, well, he's overweight and he drinks too much. So these are very human verses in Matthew's gospel, and they often get overlooked. But Jesus is making a case here for this. I'm going to tell you my best spiritual principles, he says, and I'm going to hope that you will choose from your heart, not because I have manipulated you into them, not because I've told you what to do or been too stern or too lax. I'm going to present you with what I believe are sound spiritual principles, and then you choose. And that is at the heart of our Congregationalist faith. We are not here to tell people what to believe, but even as a minister, it's my role as the learned person, as they say in the ordination service, to present you with principles, but in the end, not to enforce them. You choose them. We don't tell you what to believe, we don't tell you what to do. And it's a thin line sometimes about where that falls, but I think that in the end, anything that we choose is better than anything that we are forced to submit to. So, and then Jesus, and so that's what I think is happening in the setup to these next few verses. And then he goes on to talk about, so here's what I stand for. Come to me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. My yoke is easy, my burden light. Jesus doesn't present religious faith that is onerous or too hard or too restrictive, but it's all based upon providing comfort and home for people who are feeling just a bit overwhelmed. Now, Keats is very much trying to interfere with this broadcast, but I'm not going to let him do it. Like he's about to knock over the camera, but I'm not going to let him do it. Please, God. Over here. Yeah. There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah. If it happens, it happens. Jesus is all about providing comfort, rest, sanctuary. And in the end, I think that that's what we're called to do for each other. Why does Island United Church exist? So that we can, representing Jesus Christ in 2020, say, come here if you are weary or carrying heavy burdens, and we'll give you rest. Take this responsibility upon you and learn from what we are learning together, because we are gentle and humble in heart. And here you'll find rest for your souls. This is the purpose of religion. This is the purpose of church. And sometimes we do that for each other, for people who are in the church. And sometimes we turn outward and do it for people in society. But that's why we're here. We're not here to judge. We're not here to condemn. We are here to accompany and to equip. I think the most comforting words in the Bible are there's probably 10 sentences that we all gravitate toward. This is one of them. Come unto me, all you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I'll give you rest. There's a little prayer that Jesus does right before he says these words, where he says, God and I are one. And that thing that I talked about last week, people will know about God or me because of you. This is our purpose. This is why we're here, to speak up when people are not being treated justly, and to involve ourselves in changing the systems that don't result in equity and equality and literal sanctuary for people. And also we exist so that we can do this for each other when we need it, because there isn't one of us in this broadcast right now who hasn't at one time or another needed to hear the words of Jesus embodied through the church. Come to me if you're weary, and you will find rest. Take this yoke and learn from us, because we are gentle and humble of heart. This is what we need to hear when we're in distress or when we need help. I know that when I can remember to speak in that voice and to be that person for someone else, that's when I'm really embodying Christ and doing the best I can. It's easy to feel discouraged or to feel superior, but Jesus said, you'll find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy, my burden light. What I'm asking you to do, he says, is not difficult or impossible. It may require sacrifice at times, but it's achievable for you. So this is the principle I wanted to lift up to us when we think about our budget for the upcoming year, and how we approach our financial giving. Okay, so I do fundraising for a living in my other half of my life, or part of my life, and I go through a lot of trainings about what's important, what's sound. And here's what I believe to be true, and true of our own situation. As we've been looking at our budget, the board, by the way, I want to say this. We are opening the school on Monday. It's an experiment, 4 weeks for July, providing essential childcare for people whose jobs require them to be away from home. They need childcare, right? And we benefit, all of us, from it. So it's reduced It's not 20 students even, but we are able to do this carefully and consistent with the guidelines that the government is presenting to us right now, and partly at their encouragement because of this. The board of directors has met weekly, almost every week since this virus situation unfolded and resulted in shutdown. And they've stepped up in a new way to learn things that maybe we should have all been familiar with in the past, but we needed to learn about. The board of directors represent you, and they are financially and responsible for the school, but also not just financially, all the regulations associated with it, all the management of it. You know, we employ a person, Rita, to manage the teaching of the students for us, and that's great. But she's not responsible for the building, for the budget, for the teacher salaries, any of those things. Our board is. That's what it has meant to be a board member. And I'm telling you, they have met every single week with few exceptions in order to be able to do this and to do it well, to do it responsibly, to be informed. And I just wanted to call that out so everyone can hear it in the congregation. They've really stepped up and done some work. We would not be reopening on Monday. And if there has to be a hard decision that it was too soon, they're going to have to do that too. So pray for them. But they chose it. They chose it on your behalf. And that effort is the kind of thing it takes for us to provide what it is that we're doing, to provide, you know, because let me say this other thing very frankly. No school income, no church. I just had to say it. I know we know it, and it's not easy to hear, but sometimes you have to say it this plainly. I don't like hearing it either. We actually need the school too. People need us. We need it. So they have made this big commitment to do this. And at the same time, they're looking right now at what can we afford to do. We can't even really predict a one-year budget because we don't know what's going to happen, right? But, you know, we can do a 6-month budget. And we have had principled, difficult discussions in which we have not been 100% in agreement about the extent to which we should support outside charities during this period. Now, I think nobody questions the value of the work done by the outside charities, not a single one. But we have different levels of comfort with how much we can afford to give away. You know, we're in the black, but still, because of savings, how much we can afford to give away when we're not certain about our future. But I want to say this, no one has really suggested that we just not give any money to charity at all during this period. And in fact, as we look at this fiscal year, this will have been the year that we gave more money away than ever before. Not just to our denominational dues, but to outside charities, groups like, well, our big group is Life Moves. That's the one we support the most. And they have a variety of charities that I know that you know about and you have been active in. But we've also given money to Bay Area Border Relief. We've given additional money to the United Church of Christ's Benevolence Funds. We gave money to Ministerio Latino, Reverend Rena, who came and talked about her work with refugees, LGBT refugees in Oakland. And we gave money to the Oakland Peace Center with Reverend Shonda, and to the Interfaith Movement for Human Rights. That was Reverend Deborah, who came recently. And in fact, she's organized, and I'm participating in a vigil on Friday in solidarity with Chinese American resilience at the ICE building downtown. And I encourage you to do it. I'll post the information on the Facebook page. I say all of this to say we have given away a lot of money, and it's been a good year for us. And it's been a terrible year with the virus and all the things that have been associated with that. It's been both bountiful and terrifying. And here's where the principles of Jesus, I think, come into mind. Come unto me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart, You will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy, my burden light. These words can calm our fear and give us confidence to take the kinds of risks that we're taking. You know, I'm going to give you two, this is like famous fundraiser school examples, but they're really cool. This is not the first time that history has affected what's happening in the Bay Area. And it had an impact on philanthropy or giving, benevolence giving, charitable giving. In 1906, there was, as you know, a terrible earthquake in San Francisco. And San Francisco was much smaller, but many people thought that was going to be the end of San Francisco, that it was just going to be ruined beyond repair. And here's what happened. People responded in small, manageable ways to make a difference. I'm going to give you two examples, and I hope that they inspire us too. Amelia Haushauser was a middle-class woman who lived in, like we would call it now, Van Ness area, you know. And, you know, it wasn't just the earthquake, it was the fires that devastated the city afterwards that created such ruin and devastation. Many deaths, many illnesses. She started collecting what she could. She got blankets together, she made a tent, and then she started a soup kitchen and started collecting supplies. And soon she was serving 300 people a day at what she called the Mizpah Cafe. Mizpah is in the Old Testament, and it's a word that means sanctuary. And so this regular person created this tent, then soup kitchen, then resource center, and named it after sanctuary in the Bible, Mizpah Cafe. There's a lot of great, colorful stories about it too. And it lasted for several years. And that was one response. And the other story I'll tell you is this. There was an 8-year-old girl who nearly lost her life and her family that day in San Francisco. Her name was Dorothy Day. And Dorothy Day went on to found a big charitable movement called the Catholic Worker. And she said that fed people. And they didn't just feed people, but she said it was important that everyone be treated with dignity. So it wasn't just a place you went for food. It's a place that formed community around providing for the humanitarian needs of people. And she said she learned this as a little girl at the most terrifying time in her life, when she saw how people stepped up in the time of crisis. This is her quote that I love. What I remember plainly was the human kindness and warmth of our neighbors. My mother cooked and gave away food for as long as the crisis lasted. And for as long as the crisis lasted, we loved each other. And what happened to that 8-year-old girl? She went and started one of the largest charitable movements in the United States. And it wasn't controlled by the Catholic Church either, though they were Catholics. The bishops hated her. They totally hated her because she was independent. And she said, we don't need the church to do this. Just as Christians, this is our response. And she also knew that they would try and regulate it and take it over. But she did this. This is a response to crisis. So Islanders, I love that phrase that I recently heard Reverend Carol use with you. This is a time of crisis like never before. What's happening, we're dealing with racism like never before. The racism isn't new, but there are more people engaged. We have 8 people in our book group reading How to Be an Anti-Racist. And also it's a crisis because we don't know what's going to happen economically or politically around the coronavirus and what the long-term effects of that will be. But I do know this community has chosen to remain together. And this is not a time, I think, to cut our support, but rather a time to renew it from choice, from our heart, because we believe that kindness, gentleness, love, rest, sanctuary, safe place, the relieving of heavy burdens is something that we're called uniquely to do. We own our property, our very valuable property, right in the center of the wealthiest one of the wealthiest areas in all of California, including specifically Northern California. What a gift. So I'm asking you, as you think about your pledge, to keep these principles in mind, to give from volition, not coercion, to be willing to take a risk, and to be willing to take a risk not only on meeting our own needs, but particularly the needs right now of people like the people who are living in the Life Moves shelters, families with children. This is our time. This is why we're here. You know, like they're saying, we were listening at the Foster City City Council lately. I've been, who knew I would ever go to as many meetings as I have. They have a lot of resources. And someone said, well, we've been saving these for the rainy day. And you probably heard this if you went. This is our rainy day. It's raining. It's raining. It's pouring. This is the time to step up. So here's how I want to end this stewardship pledge. Think about your money spiritually. Think about it as something you can exercise choice over. In the world of things where we can't always choose how to have an impact, the church giving, as well as other charitable giving that we do through the church, and the charitable giving you give outside the church in your own personal lives, this is choice. This is a place to exercise influence, not just money, but it is that too. So be bold, be daring, be spiritual, and let this be a time where we show people that the words of Jesus are found to be a reality among us. Come to me, all ye that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your body and for your soul. My yoke is easy, my burden light. Amen.